Many years ago, many of us were led to believe that there was something mathematically special about Kevin Bacon because he was connected to most or all other professional actors in the Hollywood area within 6 degrees of separation. I'm going to show here that there's really nothing mathematically special about any particular person because we are all potentially connected to millions of other people with just a few degrees of separation. As for actors, I'm mostly just talking about actors associated with Hollywood or the 30 Mile Zone or the Screen Actors Guild. I'm sure there's a lot of actors that do small projects that might be shown just locally in theaters or something, and those actors may not have any connections to professional actors in the Hollywood area. So this network theory I'm going to show has all sorts of uses, like in computers and epidemiology, to find the source of diseases and such, or how diseases spread. I pretty much know nothing about that, so I'm just going to show some simple connections here. This will work for friends on social media, or friends in real life, or co-workers, or relatives, or any other connections you could think of with other people, I suppose. I'm going to use a very unsuccessful actor named Person A here for this theoretical example, just to show how an extremely unsuccessful person will be connected to many millions of people with just a few degrees of separation. Person A was only in one movie throughout their entire career. There were 10 other actors in that movie. They could have been stars, co-stars, or supporting actors, or bit parts. And maybe Person A had a very small role and just played a bit part, for example. So let's say that each of these 10 actors went on to work in a separate movie, and each of those movies had 10 separate actors. So there will be 10 actors that are 0 degrees of separation to Person A, and then there will be 100 actors that will be 1 degree of separation to Person A, and that trend continues. So it goes from 10 to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000, 100,000, and so on. It multiplies by 10 with each movie. If you notice the trend here, 0 degrees of separation will give you a 1 exponent, so you have 10 to the first power. 1 degree of separation will give you a 2 exponent, which is 10 to the second power. Then that means 6 degrees of separation will give you a 7 exponent, which is 10 to the 7th power, or 10 million people that are 6 degrees of separation from Person A. And this is assuming no redundancy or recycling, meaning that no actors are counted more than once. In reality, I did a 5-second check on Google to see about how many people were in the Screen Actors Guild, and it said there was only about 160,000 people, which is quite a bit less than that 10 million people, so obviously there's going to be huge amounts of redundancy or overlap. But this shows that potentially one very unsuccessful actor that just played a bit part could potentially be connected to 10 million other people with 6 degrees of separation. Also, I think it's important to define everything and think about all the little details so that we can speak accurately and think accurately about something. So in this case, I'm going to define this first movie as 0 degrees of separation. All of these actors are 0 degrees of separation from each other in that one movie. You could potentially define Person A as the starting point, and thus all these other actors would be 1 degree of separation from Person A, even though they were in the same movie, and that's because only Person A can be Person A. A person can only be themselves. So everybody else has to be at least 1 degree of separation. But I'm going to use the movie as the starting point, so everybody in that movie is 0 degrees of separation from each other. Also, in speaking in accurate terms, I've messed this up a few times and had to do a few retakes. To be accurate, I should say that there are potentially 10 million people that are 6 degrees of separation from Person A. I don't want to say that there are 10 million people that are within 6 degrees of separation of Person A. If I use the term within, that means I need to add up all of the people. So I need to add up all the people that are 6 degrees of separation, plus all the ones that are 5 degrees of separation, plus 4, all the way down to 0. And then I could say that there are this many people that are within 6 degrees of separation from Person A. If you add up all these numbers though, you're not going to get a huge difference. And that is because the number decreases to 1/10 of the value every time you go down. So when you drop down 1 degree, you're only adding 1/10 of the original value. When you drop down 2 degrees, you're only adding 1/100th of the original value. And when you drop down 3 degrees, you're only adding 1/1000th of the original value. So won't change a whole lot compared to your original value of 10 million people at 6 degrees of separation. Let's take another actor that was a little bit busier. Let's say they were only in 10 movies throughout their entire career, and there were 10 actors in each movie. Let's call this person B. Being in 10 movies could be considered quite successful because most of us were in 0 movies. But if you're only in about 10 movies throughout your entire life or a 30-year career, that's not terribly busy. That might be something like 1 movie every 3 years or something. So at any rate, if person B was in 10 movies throughout their career and there were 10 actors in each movie, 10 times 10, that means there are 100 people that are 0 degrees of separation from person B. Then, if each one of those actors goes on to work in other movies, so each one of those actors will be associated with 100 other people in the same manner, and then each of those actors are associated with 100 people in the same manner. Then instead of growing by a factor of 10 for every movie, it will grow by a factor of 100 for every movie. So 0 degrees of separation will have 100 people that are, 0 degrees of separation from each other. I accidentally kind of phrased that like Austin Powers. Allow myself to introduce myself. Okay, so 1 degree of separation then will have 100 to the second power. Notice the trend, 0 degrees has a 1 exponent, so 100 to the first power. 1 degree will give you a 2 exponent, 100 to the second power. That means 3 degrees will give you a 4 exponent, which is 100 to the fourth power, which is 100 million people, or about 1/3 of the population of the US, thus showing significant redundancy or overlap with many actors being counted many times. But this shows that an actor that is extremely unsuccessful or another actor that is just mildly successful will each be associated with tens of millions of people or even hundreds of millions of people within just a few degrees of separation. I keep thinking of the phrase uttered by Peter Stormare in the movie Bad Company with Chris Rock and Anthony Hopkins. He says something like, I trust you, but with each degree of separation, there's a degree of uncertainty. So, a little bit of a life lesson there. You may not just want to think about who your friends are, but sometimes it's a good idea to think about who the friends of your friends are, because those are some people that it may not be a good idea to spend a lot of time around.